Alright guys, Assistant Chief Bailey here. We're going to be going over the tanker relay system, so we know how to get water from a tanker or any other apparatus essentially. Most likely it's going to be a tanker because they hold a lot more water than an engine. So I should have pre-spawned these vehicles, so apologies for that. We're going to go ahead and spawn in the engine. And then we are also going to grab the tanker. So one thing to note before we get really started into this, I'm going to be flying through like setting up the pumps and stuff like that, because you should have already watched the other the basic pump operations video prior to watching this. So I'm going to kind of just kick right into it. One thing to note with this relay system, you have about 50 meters of relay line before it just doesn't want to work or connect. So keep in mind, it doesn't need to be this close, but it needs to be, you know, fairly close. You're relaying, right? The more line you have, technically, the water just isn't going to go through, because the pump on this thing's not as good as that. So this should be close enough for now. What we're going to do is we're going to go into first person here, and we're going to engage both of our pumps. Again, whoever is spawning these trucks needs to be the one that's working these pump panels. I can't stress that enough. There will be things that are going to bug. Alright. So similar to the other one, or the other video, it's probably best before establishing water supply like this to already have a line out, and like the engine is low on water and you need to fill it. Do not preemptively connect the tanker with an engine that's full. It won't register that it needs water, and it's just going to be an issue. So once the engine is full, you're in theory just disconnect the. If you want, you could either just leave it, or you could disconnect or close the valve on the tanker for the relay. And then once the tanker or the engine needs more water, you can open that valve up again. Again, that's just to avoid having issues where it's not syncing properly and recognizing that the engine is full or not full. So we're going to go ahead and pull a hose line off the end of this, and we are going to run it out over this way, and we are going to drop it. Now I'm doing this by myself, so there's a lot more steps. But you technically would have help doing this, like somebody, the firefighter that's going to be fighting fire will pull the line. Alright, so we're going to open up driver discharge. Right, this is it for now. Right, we don't have any water supply. We just have our pump on, driver discharge open to actually fight the fire. And again, for some reason, this thing only wants to work in third person. So we're going to go ahead and pick up this, and we're going to drain the water out. So as the water is going low on this, you have to remember that similar to the hydrant, technically you could leave once it's recognized, you could basically piggyback off of the tanker, and it in theory should reduce the amount of water in that tanker while flowing through the engine. We're gonna have to do some trial and error with it and see what works best. But for good measure now, whoever's out here controlling the pumps, once you connect the tanker via the relay, and the engineer of the engine says, "Hey, I'm full," just close the valve on the relay for the tanker, or vice versa. That way, we don't have any, we don't run into any problems. Okay, so as you can see, we are 2 bars low on water. Okay. Before we leave this area, let's go ahead and open up our rear relay. That is going to allow, or I lied, sorry. We're going to do that on the other way. So this is why it's flipped. So I'm going to put it on the driver side intake. So I'm going to open up the driver intake. You know what, we'll do this last, just so it doesn't bug. We're going to hook up the tanker first. So we're going to come over to this pump panel. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Okay, pump is engaged. We have our valves, right? Now, again, for good measure, just so it doesn't bug, I would connect the hoses first and then open up all the stuff that needs to open up. So we're going to take our rear relay, right? Now this is why it's different than a hydrant, right? Usually you'd run the supply line from the engine to the hydrant. This is flipped. So you have to run the relay line to the intake, connect relay. It'll do an animation. We're going to come back over to our tanker. And we are going to go to valves, and we are going to open up, on this it is the rear discharge, right? There's no relay on here. So you open up the rear discharge, water should be flowing in this line now. Now in order for us to fill the engine, we have to go into the engine's pump panel and open up the intake of where the water is coming in on, right? So we connect it to the driver intake. We're going to open up the driver intake, and our water is filling. Now, if it's not done in this order, there is a chance it will bug. So you have to make sure you're doing this systematically, right? It's FIVEM. No real life is in danger. You don't need to be skipping steps and trying to cut corners. You have to make sure you connect all of your lines before opening up any valves. I would even do the same thing for the hydrant, right? Take your supply line, connect it to the hydrant, and then open up your intake valve. This just avoids any issues, right? Because if you open up the intake valve first, in theory, you're going to have water leaking out of your truck anyway. So if you try to connect the hose, it might already, it'll just bug it out. So now, let's try this out. Let's go ahead and pick this line up. Now, in practicality, now the water should be draining out of the engine, and as the water drains out of the engine, the tanker should be supplementing that water, and it relays, right? And again, this system will go super into depth in this in advanced training once we get some more testing with the script. But you should be able to daisy chain, which is multiple tankers relaying to one another. Or in theory, once that tanker that's behind me would run out of water, you would disconnect the relay, or you would close all your valves for intake and relay, disconnect it. That tanker would pull off to go and refill somewhere else, either at a hydrant or draft the water. And then another second tanker would come in and do the same thing. Connect the relay, open up the valves, and then it should be filling with water. So now let's go and double check to make sure it didn't bug. We'll go into first person again. And we are full still, right? So now, the tanker has been doing its job. It has been supplementing the water. Now in theory this should be lower, which it is. So, this is basically the gist of doing this. Now, we were doing it yesterday. For those of you that are maybe watching this video, I think we have it down to where maybe we're doing too much, right? So like I said, it's very, very important. I'm going to put this line back. That we're communicating on scene, right? Communication is very, very important. If there's too many people trying to do things, it's going to get confusing, and then people are going to forget to do things or in the incorrect order, and again, there's a potential that it could bug it out, right? So again, it's a pain in the butt, but we're going to come over here to the engine pump panel. We're going to go to valves. We're going to close the driver discharge because we put our line back. We are going to close the driver intake, and we are going to come back over to the tanker. This is where it kind of gets weird. Okay, you're going to come over to this valve, disconnect or close the rear discharge on that. And now you should be able to disconnect the relay line from here. Let's double check if you can from here or not. No. So again, you have to just see where you have to do things. When you disconnect it from the hydrant, I think you just disconnect it straight from the hydrant or the engine, can't remember. But for this, whatever truck you are relaying off of, you have to go to the source of the relay, right? Disconnect relay line. And now we're back in business. In theory, if this tanker was empty on water, they would take it out of pump, and they would drive off, go and fill up. A second tanker would come in, and do the same thing, right? So say this is going to be a little bit of a longer video, but we need to make sure that we understand the basics of this, right? So right now there is no water, like nothing is flowing, right? Or say somebody's fighting fire with the discharge lines. Tanker pulls up on scene, right? All the valves are closed on both trucks. The only difference is both trucks are in pump, with the pump engaged, and the driver discharge, let's say, is open with somebody fighting fire. Again, I'm going to show it a second time. You're going to take your relay. You're going to connect your relay to your intake. Okay, again, sometimes it does a little fucking buggy thing like that. Again, welcome to FIVEM. You're going to come over to the pump panel of your tanker. You're going to open up your rear discharge to get water flowing in that line. You're going to come over here. And you would open up your driver intake, and we'll open up the discharge again, and then pull this line. There we go. Yeah, welcome to FIVEM. This is going to be a normal occurrence for us, guys. So we'll drain some water out. Now, again, in theory, the tanker should be supplying water to the engine as we use the engine water, right? In real life, it works very, very different. But for the sake of FIVEM, that's what it's doing. We're pulling water out of the engine. As we're using the water, the tanker immediately supplements that water. Okay. So say we're done with that. We're going to come back over here. We're going to return our line. We're going to open up our pump panel. We are still full. We're going to come over to valves, and we'll close our discharge. We'll close our intake. Come over to our tanker. Do the same thing. Make sure all of our valves are closed before removing any hose for a supply line or a relay. Okay, that's good. We're going to go ahead and disconnect this. And hopefully it gets rid of all that crazy mess of a hose, which it did. And now we're in business, right? So, again, from using all that water, we should have gone down in water on this tanker as well. Yep. So, hopefully this video kind of brings a little bit more, like, idea of what's going on here. And hopefully you guys are learning stuff. Again, I'm a visual learner, but I also need to be hands-on with this stuff to understand how everything works. So if you guys are still kind of confused, hopefully you have a better understanding and can do the basics. The tanker portion of it is a little bit more in-depth. There's certain things that need to be done in a certain order, like I said, so it doesn't bug out. But for the most part, this is kind of what we're dealing with for now. Again, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I don't mind, just don't blow up my DMs with stuff like this unless there's serious bugs. But if you guys are trying to get trained on it in-game, we can always do stuff at the station. And I'm sure that senior firefighters, lieutenants, and battalion chiefs, and even the fire chief would be more than happy to get in-game and go over this stuff with you guys on shift, or even just in general. So again, reach out to your chain of command if you have any more questions. I know this probably was a little bit longer of a video, and I'm sorry for that. We want to make sure you guys have the resources needed to understand what we're doing here. So that pretty much is going to wrap up these 3 videos. We covered the SCBA, we went over basic pump operations, and we did relaying from a tanker. Everything else will be probably covered in-game training for advanced fire. And so if you guys like these types of videos and they help prior to even trainings, we can do stuff like this too, where it'll be a prerequisite for the training, so you understand the basics of it, so the trainings in-game go a little bit faster. So any feedback, I mean, you could just comment on the video, I guess, but reach out to us in Discord, and if you guys have any feedback or suggestions on what you guys want to see training-wise. So that's going to do it for these 3. Again, thank you all for watching and listening. and we appreciate you guys being a part of the department, and we're excited to have all this stuff implemented. And y'all stay safe and have a good day. See you on the next one.